Welcome. I am Dr. Vasant Meghna Murthy. I am the Assistant Professor at the Department of Psychiatry at Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences, deemed to be University Karad. I also function as a Secretary of the Student Guidance Cell, an autonomous cell of KIMS DU Karad, which is dedicated to providing an environment conducive to the personal and professional development of all the students who are enrolled in the various courses offered by our university. The Student Guidance Cell has done a lot of work in the past 5 to 6 years, and especially in the area of organizing guest lectures and workshops on life skills and study skills, which are the key areas of attention of the cell. We also have been working towards destigmatizing mental illnesses and destigmatizing help-seeking behavior, and in view of this, we provide mental health interventions to our students who may be experiencing emotional problems, behavior problems at the Department of Psychiatry, and we ensure that student safety and confidentiality is always kept up. The Student Guidance Cell also recently has started publishing an e-magazine for students of MBBS course at our university, which is called the Young Scholar, and it provides a lot of academic content as well as articles on life and study skills. Now, in a new step, the Student Guidance Cell has organized a virtual interview today on a topic that has become very relevant in recent times, that is mindfulness. We know mindfulness is a meditative way of life, and it has its roots in Buddhism, and its value has been recognized in the recent years, so much so that even school curricula are now changing to include mindfulness practices even as in children as young as in kindergarten, and this is seen in curriculum even in Indian schools. So we thought we would like to introduce mindfulness as an important resilience building tool to our students at KIMS DU through this virtual interview. The guest I have invited for this interview is a dear friend of mine, Dr. Milan Balakrishnan, who is a psychiatrist practicing at Mumbai at Bombay Hospital and Masina Hospitals. He also has his own private practice. He is a PG teacher and describes himself as a lifelong learner of mindfulness. He has been the past secretary of the Bombay Psychiatric Society as well. I have invited him specifically because he practices mindfulness, and he also incorporates mindfulness as part of his therapeutic practices with other clients. So I welcome you all to this virtual interview. Stay on and watch the interview. Thank you.
Dr. Meghna said, we have known each other for more than 20 years now. I just realized it when she said it. But yeah, so I think let's not waste a lot of time and let's begin quickly, since we
All right.
want to keep it brief and but still be able to put across.
Okay, so let me start off with my first question. Why did you become a student of mindfulness? And just explain what mindfulness is to our audience.
All right. So from a sort of definition that John Kabat-Zinn, the person who sort of has made mindfulness more mainstream in that sense, right? The origins of mindfulness, like Meghna was saying, are in Eastern philosophy, are in Buddhist philosophy, to come from the traditions of Vipassana, yoga. All of this do have very powerful, strong elements of mindfulness in them, and with that background, so mindfulness. Uh, I would like to explain mindfulness as something that involves us being able to uh, pay attention with intention in the present moment. So your intention is clear, your attention is on the present moment, with awareness of what's happening in and around you, and without judgment, right? Without judgment as to whether what is coming up is good or bad. So that's the whole essence of mindfulness, really, in that sentence. So it's not whether it's meditation, which is also something that we use interchangeably. Uh, it's not only about focus. It is about all these things coming together.
Then why did you choose mindfulness?
Okay. Why did I choose to do mindfulness? Um, so mindfulness was something that uh, and the basis of mindfulness is also in what we call curiosity, or beginner's mind, of wanting to discover something, of exploring something that you've not explored before. And that's how the journey with mindfulness began. That this was interesting, but also my judgment on it was that it was very esoteric, very spiritual, something that I'm not sure whether I will really connect to. uh, but I said I must still explore, just to understand what it is, and also in order to see if this would benefit patients. So that was the agenda or the intention at that time. But on exploring mindfulness further, I have come to realize that it's much more useful initially for self work, to work with yourself, than with patients. Patients also, of course, later, once you're more in tune with working yourself.
Yourself. Okay. So now this 1.5, 2 years have been very difficult for everybody. So as a psychiatrist who's practicing in Bombay, do you feel people have become much more aware and interested in this practice now?
Sure. I think people have become more aware of their anxieties, of their worries, of of their experience, the distress and uncertainty that the pandemic has brought. So all of that has definitely made people, like I said, more aware of anxiety. So anxiety, so dealing with anxiety now is a process that involves doing a lot of things. So one of the things has been mindfulness. So people have ventured out to explore this avenue through various ways, right? Mindfulness, although uh, strictly by the definition, may be found in many places, may be found through various routes. Mindfulness is like uh, something that you can find via vipassana, via spirituality, even via prayer. So it's something that is a practice that you can use differently for different people, um, and make it effective. But um, we should so when it comes to a scientific assessment of mindfulness, then we go back to like the basic definition.
Okay. So that means people are becoming a bit more aware, at least of their emotions. We can say they're becoming
Yes,
mindful of their emotions.
yes, they have.
All right. So now you did mention Vipassana and yoga. How does mindfulness differ from Vipassana, yoga, transcendental meditation, and all other forms of meditation that are quite popular?
Right, right. So like I said, um, meditation and various forms of meditation may involve mindful practices, but they may have various sort of let's call it various orientations, various agendas. The way they work may be different. They may be led by uh, different sets of leaders who may have um,
Meanings in a
different
way.
ways of
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah.
same things,
Yeah.
right? So all of this is what. So again, Vipassana is also entrenched in Buddhist philosophy. Uh, Again, Goenkaji's practices and all of those. But the practices in Vipassana are much more intense, more demanding. Somehow I found that they don't. Mindfulness takes a very slow, soft approach
Yes.
to meditative practices, while Vipassana is more rigorous.
Yes.
more demanding. So I think that can sometimes make it a little difficult for people to sort of adapt and adopt it. Some people find it very useful. Yes, no doubt about it. It does have the elements of mindfulness very strongly woven into it, but I think the approach is a little more sort of demanding.
So maybe mindfulness can be a stepping stone towards the deeper meditative practices.
Meditative practices, yes, that's
All
true.
right.
Also, in terms of yoga, you have a lot of you can weave mindfulness into your yogic practices. So
Yes.
whether you're doing your asanas, you can always look at uh, how it feels, how the sensations are, how so doing a very slow deliberate kind of yoga rather than asanas which go very
Yes.
fast is how mindfulness can be woven into yoga. Also, your breathing practice of anulom vilom also have the elements of mindfulness in them. So these are the mindful elements are there all around us. It's something that we have naturally. It's a capacity that we have naturally, but we seem to have lost it in this whole um, distracted inner as well as outer self.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, would you mind discussing a little bit of evidence that this works so that the students have motivation to take it up?
Okay. So earlier, when mindfulness practices were sort of investigated, it seemed to be that they were investigated with a little more bias and sort of so most of the studies seem to be very strongly in favor of mindfulness. But over a period of time, these studies have also evolved. We have meta-analysis about assessing mindfulness, like the mindfulness-based stress reduction program is a very well established program that UCLA conducts, which helps their patients with cancer, with other serious illnesses. So more and more rigorous studies are happening and have happened, and there are meta-analysis to establish that it does help in reducing anxiety. It does help in um, making people feel more relaxed, reduces the extent of stress, um, and reduces depressive symptoms. It also helps um those with cardiac illnesses, and people have found to have lower blood pressures among those who regularly practice mindfulness.
Okay. So there's no specific type of person who will benefit. It's like it'll suit everybody.
Right. So generally, yes, mindfulness, like I said, is a very naturally available to us resource, which we have probably stopped using now. So it's something that we can all incorporate into our day-to-day lives in order to sort of make l- sort of ourselves as well as our interactions more meaningful, right? So there is this need to sort of for all of us to sort of discover this mindful practices. It may not be in the form of sort of rigid meditative practices, but it may be even in the form of just being more conscious during the day, just taking 1 minute out in the day to just pause and check in and see how you feel, or even just uh, so commit to a certain activity with full full presence and intention. So it may be just that you will make sure that when you're in a conversation, you're fully there and you're listening and trying to do it with minimum judgment. So yeah, more or less, generally practices, day-to-day practices anybody can do. When it comes to the more focused meditative practices, yes, will be very beneficial for those with anxiety, uh, those with a lot of those who tend to find themselves jittery, on the edge, restless, feel it's sort of mindfulness is a good way to sort of put a space between ourselves and our reaction. So just that sense of being able to pause a second before you react or respond to a session and to be able to just see how you are responding to that particular situation. So that anybody and everybody can do. Only thing in terms of serious meditation, uh, with regards to those with psychosis or severe mental illnesses, they must use it with caution
With
or be
caution.
fully guided.
Yes, makes sense. All right. So now my next question is, you mentioned people suffering from anxiety and ruminating a lot, or on the edge. We have a lot of students of this sort. Some of them even have a diagnosed disorder. So in that situation, would it be advisable to just use mindfulness initially, or would it be an adjuvant?
Okay. Okay. No, so you can start with mindful practices early also, as a sort as an adjuvant. So you can start off with whatever treatment modality that you want to use with with the student. Also at the same time, get them to sort of practice mindfulness even for short periods of time, because also it's important to remember that the mistake that people often make with mindfulness is that you go in there expecting something to happen, and that's not what mindfulness is about. You when you're practicing it, you if you're going with this intention that something is going to change rapidly, it's definitely not going to change. It's not going to happen suddenly. Mindfulness meditation is like uh, building up muscle in the gym. It's like if you when you keep doing it for a period of time, after many months you will realize that okay, your muscles now look bigger, bulkier, or while with exactly like that with mindfulness, you are not going to see sudden change, you're not going to see sudden improvement, but it's a practice that sort of uh, builds strength, in terms of not really building mental strength as such, because we wouldn't call it that, right? But in terms of building our ability to deal with anxiety much better. So
Probably
that's
explains my experience. I had a terrible experience. I had tried mindfulness techniques when I used to feel a lot of anxiety as a PG student. But what I realized was it was very deliberate, it was very contrived. And those few moments of, focusing on all the sensations really made me more on the edge. And I just did not like the way I felt. And is this something that happens to people initially?
very much, very much. I think it might help. I don't know whether it works for everyone, but it does help for many to start off with a group practice. And I think that's where Vipassana seems to work better, because when you start with a group, you sort of commit a little bit more to uh, doing it on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, when you start mindful practices and you start one another error that we make when we practice mindfulness is that we believe that the end product of it should be to be able to achieve a calm empty mind, and that is definitely not what mindfulness looks to achieve. That is not the idea. The idea is clearly that we are able to look at our thoughts that come and go, and look at them non-judgmentally. So that's the key, not to empty and calm the mind. That's what people who meditate generally also expect, that when I meditate I should have an empty mind, I should have a calm mind. That's absolutely not what will happen, right? And our brain is not made that way. Our brain is meant to have this continuous process of thoughts coming in out and going out, and that's what is going to happen when we practice mindfulness as well. So even in very short meditative practices, we may find ourselves flooded with thought. That's when people are experiencing very high anxiety, when you try mindfulness, you tend to find yourself getting more and more anxious, because there's this flood of thoughts, and then it becomes very difficult, and you feel that, oh, I can't handle this, I was better off not doing this. So that's usually where the trouble is. So it's always useful, I think, to one do a bit of guided meditation. So guided by someone who has experience of meditation or at least mindfulness at some level. And the other thing is even a group
Group.
mindfulness practice may help a lot of people.
Okay. So then when you say to experience the thoughts and allow the thoughts without judgment, I'm assuming you're implying the good thoughts, the bad thoughts, the ugly thoughts.
Yes,
Correct.
yes. Any thought that comes up.
Okay. Now, I'm fascinated by this primarily because this does not seem to involve any spirituality or any religion. And so I think people who are, atheists or non-believers like myself would probably find this a little more appealing compared to other forms of meditation, where there's not a lot of religious leanings or spiritual leanings coming into the picture.
Yeah, that's where I think the whole purpose of mindfulness has been, like I said, although it's originates from very sort of uh, the whole Buddhist philosophy, but mindfulness sort of looks to sort of remove the aspects of spirituality and religion as much as possible. Although it is a very spiritual process, it's a very personal kind of interaction with self. So it is very spiritual in that sense. It's not religious though. Yeah.
Right. So now, students to understand an example of a mindful practice, can you just describe the steps involved in a mindful practice to us?
Right. So I was looking to see if we can just do a bit of a guided meditation. Uh, do we have the time to do like a
Time.
5 minutes?
Yeah, we have, we have. A demonstration would actually help people who are interested.
Yeah. So if you ask me, how do you practice just a simple kind of meditation? The first thing is, of course, set aside sort of a time for it, specifically where you will uh, do a bit of meditative practice. And the most common meditative practices in terms of mindfulness, I either what one that's called a body scan, and one is which is a breath based meditation. I think the breath based meditation is usually uh, works and is the simplest one that we can do.
This mindful podcast is made possible in part by Warner Classics and the music of Ryopi. His album Tree of Light is the perfect accompaniment to your meditation practice. Listen today on your preferred streaming platform. So find a relaxed, comfortable position, seated on a chair or on the floor, on a cushion. Keep your back upright, but not too tight. Hands resting wherever they're comfortable. Tongue on the roof of your mouth or wherever it's comfortable. You can notice your body from the inside, noticing the shape of your body, the weight, touch. Let yourself relax and become curious about your body. Seated here, the sensations of your body, the touch, the connection with the floor or the chair. Relax any areas of tightness or tension. Just breathe, soften. And now begin to tune into your breath in your body. feeling the natural flow of breath. Don't need to do anything to your breath. Not long, not short, just natural. And notice where you feel your breath in your body. It might be in your abdomen. It may be in your chest or throat or in your nostrils. See if you can feel the sensations of breath, one breath at a time. When one breath ends, the next breath begins. Now, as you do this, you might notice that your mind may start to wander. You might start thinking about other things. If this happens, this is not a problem. It's very natural. Just notice that your mind has wandered. You can say thinking or wandering in your head softly. And then gently redirect your attention right back to the breathing. So we'll stay with this for some time in silence, just a short time. Noticing our breath, from time to time getting lost in thought and returning to our breath. See if you can be really kind to yourself in the process. Again, you can notice your body, your whole body seated here. Let yourself relax even more deeply. And then offer yourself some appreciation for doing this practice today. Whatever that means to you. Finding a sense of ease and well-being for yourself and this day. This mindful podcast is made possible in part by Warner Classics.
Although being online probably was not a good way to do this, but it still gave us an idea of what a small mindful practice looks like. And I think a lot of it is just being. There's really nothing else. It's just being. And this would help a lot of our students who often complain of not being able to get rid of certain thoughts. So many students say that I'm having XYZ thoughts and I'm not able to stop them. I'm not able to control them. And I think for those kind of students, mindful practice could be useful, and I think they should give it a shot. All right. So thank you for this one small brief exercise. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you was, although I told you my difficulty with mindful practice when I was in PG, But I did notice that whenever I'm outside in nature, when I'm hiking or even just walking by myself, I become acutely aware of my surroundings, the sounds of the birds, the wind, everything. And it becomes very pleasurable. And in hindsight, it seems like I become naturally mindful when I'm out in nature. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Like like I was saying, mindfulness is otherwise a natural resource available to us, and I think children are the most mindful. They naturally are very mindful. They are more or less fully there where they are, not usually worrying about the past or the future. I think that's something, and also they are curious. They're looking to discover things. So that's how mindfulness is, right? It's something that we have as children and we lose over a period of time. We tend to get lost in the rigmarole of day-to-day life. So I guess when you're back in nature, it's something that you connect to, something that you feel associated with, and also you're able to be there without again being lost in other thoughts.
So then I think when you're starting off mindfulness practices, starting off with things that you already enjoy and being mindful there would probably be a much better introduction than trying a new kind of a practice. Like I tried mindful eating several times and it didn't work, but this works. So I think just enjoying the things that you do and then being mindful there would be a good thing.
Very true. I think that's useful to say that you start with something that you are comfortable doing, where you are able to do mindful, be mindful, and then see if you can slowly move that to other things where you're more where you are more with intention and presence, even to other situations,
Yeah.
whether it's a conversation or whether it's interactions.
Yeah. All right. One other interesting thing that I saw was there's a friend of mine who posts a lot of doodles on Facebook, and she somehow has associated this doodling with, therapy, mindful therapy, where she is able to completely focus on her doodles, and her doodles are beautiful. So I think artistic students or students who like doodling could also take up mindful doodlings. And do you
Right.
know of people who do that?
Right. So basically, another sort of route to mindfulness uh, is with art, creativity, drawing, coloring. A lot of the mandala art drawings are again
Yes.
uh, associated very strongly with mindful practices, where you're looking at very intrinsic, small kind of designs, where you need to really be very intent and aware of what you're doing. So I think again, creativity, art is another place where mindfulness is applied well, because you're just there and you're just following whatever comes up. um, Meaning, although things are deliberate, they're not forced. It's just a flow. It's just that sort of, again with whether it's art or creativity or even sports, when people talk about being in that zone, uh, being in the flow, it's like that they're just there, they're doing things very very naturally. It comes very sort of without much effort,
Spontaneously.
yeah, very spontaneous and without much effort, without being forced. So although deliberate, yet not forced.
Makes sense. And I have a lot of students who are extremely artistic, and I'm surprised that they don't seem to be following this hobby and their interest once they come into medical college. And I'm sure we're guilty of that too. When we were studying medicine, we don't know too many people who pursued their passion for arts and creativity while they were in medicine. So I think this is one more reason why students who have creative bent of mind should pursue it, even though they're pursuing MBBS. You just let it go. So all the students are listening over there. Now, I want to ask you, where did you learn mindfulness from, so that people who are interested can also approach the same place?
Right. I learned, or I'm still learning mindfulness at the center in Pune called Just Being.
Okay.
It's run by Sandy Dias Andrade, who's trained in mindfulness and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And I was part of a course called as presence-oriented psychotherapy, which is more uh, directed at how presence could be used to help others to use it as a form of psychotherapy. But they do a lot of courses also for self, for basic counseling skills, for non psychiatrists or therapists as well, which is based on the mindful philosophy. So all of these
So
courses they do.
it's open to
But
anybody
there are a
who's
lot of
interested.
lot of centers. There are a lot of centers that train, including the center at UCLA where you can also train, which is of course much more expensive, but it's available as well. So there are a lot of courses, even on, for example, Coursera or Udemy or all of these, which also offer like not too expensive courses on mindfulness, but you can just check them out before you sort of.
Yes, I think Coursera Udemy would be a good option because it allows flexibility and gets you warmed up to the concept of mindfulness. Makes sense. Now, do I have any more further questions? Yes, I do. Just tell us a few ways in which mindfulness has changed your life, the good and the bad.
Okay. Like I said, the whole idea of mindfulness is not to change our lives drastically. It's just to make us more aware, so that we live more productive lives, and we live more relaxed, less anxious lives. Let's say that. But again, like I was saying, my journey into mindfulness has been begun with a lot of skepticism that I don't know whether this is useful. Is it just a hype? Does it really work? But it's I have realized over once I started doing it, and I don't think I would have done it on my own. So this was again, while we were training, it was a group practice. So I think that helped a lot. It made it a lot easier to uh, practice. And while practicing, you realize that uh, we tend to be very cognitive, and we try to look at things only from a thought perspective. But mindfulness helps us sort of look at sensations and emotions. Those are things, sensations especially, is something that we don't explore unless we are very mindful. When we are there meditating, you realize, okay, there is this discomfort in my spine, there is this pain in my leg, which I would not have sort of felt in my day-to-day life. So I think that's something that mindfulness adds. It helps you look at yourself and your body with uh, looking at certain aspects that we often neglect. So it helps us sort of adding or making the shift from only a purely cognitive assessment of ourselves to a more complete sort of assessment of
Holistic
life.
assessment.
Yeah.
All right. So now just one last question that I have. Since you mentioned it's a very cognitive practice, it reminded me, I wanted to ask you, does it help improve attention, concentration, memory, recall, things like that?
Okay. So clinically and from research perspective, it's found to, of course, improve attention, improve focus. Uh, it's it has shown to. Personally, if you ask me, attention, focus again are things that will improve over a longer period of time. You don't. It's definitely not a quick fix. It's not a fix at all. It's more of adding a, a perspective to life that makes us look at life more openly. And it's mindfulness is more of a philosophy that you apply to your lives than just the practice. So it's also about being able to uh, look at this as something that you adapt to your day-to-day life in order to make make life more meaningful. So it's that it's the entire philosophy of mindfulness that you need to incorporate. So whether it's like with yoga or vipassana, people do the asanas but don't necessarily adopt the philosophy. So that's where I think again mindfulness goes. If you do the practice, very, but we need to go beyond just doing the practice into applying it as a philosophy in our lives.
Yes. All right. So I think we have had a very fruitful session on mindfulness, and I hope all the students who have logged in and the faculty members have learned something today from this first of a kind virtual interview that we had from the student guidance cell. To the end, I'd like to thank everyone from KIMS DU for all the support and who make this all our endeavors possible. I thank Dr. Milan, my friend, my friend and my enemy. I always catch hold of him for everything. And this meeting has been recorded, and the video will be available on YouTube. So anyone who's interested in listening to it once again may do so on the link that will be provided soon. And if anyone wants to reach out to us with any questions regarding mindfulness, or wants to reach out to Dr. Milan Balakrishnan, please catch hold of me. I'm the one who will get you to him. All right. So I declare the meeting has ended. Thank you very much.